Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Changes to immigration policy and the impact on Memphis. Tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Mauricio Calvo from Latino Memphis. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
And John Smarrelli from CBU, president. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation.
And Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. The show we're doing today is inspired or is a result of the proposed changes to DACA. President Trump has said that DACA will expire in 6 months. It has caused quite a scramble among a lot of groups. It was pushed for by certain folks and really resisted by others. DACA was put in place by President Obama, in 2012, that allowed children who, and you all correct me where I get this wrong, but children who were brought here at a very young age from another country, undocumented parents, and they are undocumented, to apply for status and move towards a legal status where they could work, they could drive, they could go to school. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So some 800,000 kids and now young adults and adults fall into this category. So let's talk your reaction. I'll start with you, Mauricio, when that proposal, that Trump had talked about it, President Trump had talked about it on the campaign trail. Some people were frustrated he didn't, reverse the executive order on day one. He waited 6, 7, 8 months. What are your thoughts?
So it's very complicated, of course, like anything on immigration. Obviously, it's a humanitarian issue, but it's also a practical issue. I mean, there's about, depending on who you ask, anywhere between 8,000 to 10,000 people in Tennessee under this category, and thousands of them are here in Memphis. So even though the president may be saying that, or he said that during his campaign, 10,000 people in Tennessee are working, driving, going to school, and just kind of pulling the plug on that, it makes a mess for colleges and universities, for landlords, for the economy. Besides, it's again, the humanitarian aspect of that. It's rather complex. So he said he was going to end DACA on the first day of his administration. He waited 8 months. And even that, he said, we're going to end it, but I might revise it later. A lot of mixed messaging, and it makes it very confusing.
And Dr. Smarrelli, CBU has been very open and very aggressive in bringing DACA kids and working with undocumented immigrants. Your thoughts on this?
Our mission has been to reach out to those individuals who again, otherwise wouldn't get a college education. That's sort of mission-driven, so it makes perfect sense for CBU to do this. But the confusion that this has led to, the anxiety in our students, is my major concern, because there's a constant sense that, are we going to be deported? Are we able to complete our degree? What is going to really happen? And I think, that's sort of the situation right now, this uncertainty, this anxiety among our students, and what do we do next? And they're looking for the adults to sort of set the lead and set the pace for moving forward. I think what the president did in his action is sort of force the issue. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? And I think that really is I think there's an opportunity there for our legislators to do what they need to do, but there's certainly the anxiety on the part of our students.
Right, and President Trump has said, and then I'll go to Bill, but President Trump has said, look, he wants Congress. The reason he's saying it's going to expire in 6 months is he wants Congress to do something. And some critics, and I think even one federal judge said, look, the executive order that Obama issued is not the way to approach this, is not legal, is not the right way to do it. It should be Congress act to give legal status to these kids or not. But it should not be done by executive order.
I'm a firm believer in that. Let's develop laws that make some sense for these young individuals who can be great contributors to our society. And I think that's what he was trying to push. The president was trying to push in removing DACA.
Yeah, Bill.
So it sounds so simple on the surface, and of course in politics nothing is simple as, okay, you have 6 months to work this out. This seems in one way to be a new kind of uncertainty, or a new chapter of uncertainty, because there was certainly uncertainty during the Obama administration and a lack of consensus on a consistent policy not only on this issue, but on other immigration issues. And Mauricio, you've talked about that even before we had the change in the White House.
Yeah, the frustrating thing here, I mean, it's once again how we do things. I mean, the president could have said, Congress, if you don't act on this in 6 months, I want to pull the plug. It's different than pulling the plug and then kicking the can to a Congress that, by the way, has not been able to accomplish anything. You know, they haven't been able to accomplish healthcare reform, tax reform, any of these things. So you're telling Republicans now you have to fix this and go home and claim that the only victory that you had is immigration. I mean, it's highly unlikely. So I mean, the president could have again said, if you guys don't fix this, you know, we're going to end this program in 6 months. Or option B, here's a proposal. As executive, I am proposing this legislation. What do you guys think about it? Mm-hmm. But it's this thing about just leaving no option on the table and let Congress figure it out while Congress is unable to get anything done lately. I mean, I don't trust Congress and I don't trust the president, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. What to you makes sense for conditions on a DACA that is a legislative act?
Well, I mean, so what conditions are we okay? I mean, what are we willing to compromise? I mean, I think DACA is a really good example. So first of all, people had to be in the country for a while. It's not amnesty. It's a pathway. So again, it was something where students had to be, I mean, young children had arrived when they were young. They had to be in the country for about 5 years before they could apply. They had to go to a background check, through an FBI background check. They had to be fingerprinted. They had to report where they lived. They had to be either enrolled in school or had been to school. So they have all these, you know, common sense requirements. This, if you will, vetting process. And then in that case, they got a work permit. And they were allowed to stay to work. You know, it's funny because some people don't want folks to be here undocumented, but they will also block any effort for them to be documented. When people talk about getting in line, this is a perfect example of people getting in line, and they got in line and they did what they were supposed to do. President Obama had to act on an executive order because Congress wouldn't move. Mm-hmm. So I think those conditions are fine. I don't think this should be amnesty. This is not for everybody. There are certain conditions. Again, people have to be in school. They have to be behaving. They have to be contributing. And I think that makes sense.
So, John, with the uncertainty on this, the new uncertainty, and then the uncertainty that this is an executive order and at any moment it could be rescinded, and it doesn't look like Congress is going to come up with anything permanent. What have you been telling students who are referred to as the Dreamers, under the Dreamers Act?
We have been telling our students we're taking a more optimistic view than maybe my colleague Mauricio is saying. We are optimistic that there can be legislation that will lead to a pathway of permanent status. These are contributing members to our society. I mean, the impact of rescinding DACA is incredible. It's billions of dollars at the federal level, $460 billion, I believe, over 10 years in terms of just impact on the economy, even the Tennessee economy. We're looking at $350 million a year in GDP impact if all the DACA students who are working right now would go away. It makes absolutely no sense to me from a political, financial point of view to say, go away, we don't want you anymore in our country, because they have, as Mauricio said, they have done what they have to do. They are working, they're going to school, and they're achieving at rates that are as equal to or even greater than many of our traditional students at CBU. And it's up to me as their president to say, I've got to go to every congressperson I can talk to, every senator I can talk to, and say, these are contributing members to our society, and that's really what the issue is for me.
And what do you hear from our representatives in Congress, each of you?
I'm hearing bipartisan support, but yet going back to what Mauricio says, can they get the act done? Can they get the DREAM Act or some of the other Bridge Act or some of the other proposals that are out there? Can they get it done? Because I think there's bipartisan support for getting this done, but.
And it's not that I'm not optimistic. I think when people get too optimistic, we can get complacent and we can just kind of say like, oh, they're going to take care of this. I mean, Dr. Smarrelli just said so many of the things that are common sense, but it seems like common sense is the least common of the senses nowadays. I mean, there's so many things that make sense, and yet they're not happening. And I think we need to hear from more people like John and CEOs from companies here in Memphis. We have heard from people in Silicon Valley and other big names. Everybody needs to be making this a big deal. It is a big deal not only for those DACA students, it's a big deal for the economy. I was talking to somebody at a company here in town, a large company, and I was telling them, look, I guarantee you have hundreds of these kids working in your company. They just don't wear a flag saying, hey, I'm a DACA. I mean, HR will know who these people are, but you probably have hundreds of these people working for you here in your headquarters and nationwide too. So, if one day they start disappearing, that is going to create, an HR mess for you. It's complicated. So people need to get out of their comfort zone and take a position and say, we need to speak up on this.
Was it, in hindsight, a mistake? I mean, and you guys correct me on the procedures where I'm wrong. To file for, to go down the path you talked about, you had to come forward. You had to register. You had to say, here, I came here when my parents came across the border illegally. I was a child. I've been here. I've lived here for 5, 10, 20 years, however long it is, and essentially register with the government. I mean, people have said, well, now there's a database of these people who are technically here illegally, who could be deported. They've registered with HR. They've registered with your school. I mean, do you hear from kids who say, I should not have stepped forward? I should have stayed in the shadows because I was safer then?
We heard that at the beginning. People were reluctant to sign up, but then I think when people saw the benefits and that was the only immigration relief that was going to happen, people did it. 100,000 people did it, right? So I'm sure there were people who never did it for those reasons, but now people are really worried. I mean, can you trust Jeff Sessions and his department that they are not going to come after these people? They know exactly where they live, who they are, and everything. So there's this trust factor, but I think people are tired. I think people are saying, like, I got it. I mean, I had enough, and we just, you hear this thing, you hear this thing about undocumented and unafraid. I think particularly young people are extremely concerned, but we have to also think that these people don't live in silos. They have families that are undocumented. They are living with their parents. I mean, the community is afraid, but then people are going to say, like, well, I mean, I got to do this. I mean, and this is just like another reality of a broken immigration system.
Yeah, all of this is at a time when, and we've talked a little bit on the show, with the new administration, the Trump administration has, by many accounts, upped the pressure on undocumented immigrants. More raids by Immigration and Customs, more, even NPR, I heard a story this week about people being picked up in hospitals, emergency rooms, places that were considered sort of safe zones where the officials wouldn't go there. That follows Obama, although he put DACA forward, he also dramatically upped the number of people who are deported, right? I mean, so for the community, I mean, particularly we'll focus on the Dreamer kids who were brought here ostensibly against their will. I mean, they just went with their family. Is there just an increasing level of fear? I mean, do you hear that among your students?
Sure, there's an incredibly increasing level of fear. What are we going to do? And what are we going to do? I mean, there was optimism when they signed for DACA because they believed they could be contributing members to our society, working members of our society, and going to school and furthering their own career. So there was a certain optimism when DACA was instituted, I think, and that optimism was that there would be a pathway somehow to permanent residency or to citizenship. That clearly hasn't happened yet, and that's where the anxiety is now occurring.
And I think, just to add on that, if I could, I think, not to contradict with what I just said, I think there's a lot of people who are willing to come out and say, this is my story, this is, I had it, but at the same time, inside themselves, I mean, they're young, so they're eager and they have a lot of strength. But this is the only country they know. If you were to deport an adult might say, well, I used to live there. I don't want to go back, but I guess I can do it. Some of these children have never been there. I mean, they were there when they were 2 years old or 1 year old. So really the impact, the anxiety and the trauma is going to be harder on them.
Right.
A student, Frankie, at our institution from Honduras, came over when he was 2 or 3. you know, they ask him, what about Honduras? I don't care about Honduras. That's not my country. The United States is my country. When the Star Spangled Banner comes on, that gives me goosebumps, not the Honduran national anthem. That's the kind of students these DACA students are right now, or the kind of people they are. They love this country, and they want to do what's best for this country.
All right, 10 minutes left, Bill.
And John, to that point, I believe Frankie was the young man who actually went to the White House.
Correct.
So you have this odyssey where this young man went to the White House, met the President of the United States as an example of the executive order working very much in the open. If in 6 months Congress doesn't come up with a solution to this, with a permanent policy, he's also very much in the spotlight.
Sure.
For this. He could.
But he believes in the United States of America. He believes that there'll be laws or opportunities for him, and that's the beautiful part about these individuals. As much as it appears, I mean, they're in this tenuous situation, there's a lot of them who just believe that this is the country where they belong, the country where they can make a difference, the country where they can get an education and work and make a difference. But I agree, Bill, it certainly put himself out in a very precarious situation by being public with his DACA status. And, you know, we really, at our university, we don't really record whether you're DACA or not. We basically, you know, if you're qualified, if you are able to get into CBU with our policies for admission, we really don't say, well, you're DACA, you're not DACA. You know, where's your country of origin is, adds to the diversity of our campus.
And I know one underlying question here is all the time. I mean, people will say, this is very simple. They broke the law. We're a country of laws. They need to go back. And people always say that. And look, I get it. We are a country of laws. But one thing that people often don't know is that immigration law is civil law. It's not criminal law. So this affiliation about, you know, arresting people for being in the country illegally, being in the country unlawfully, like these children, is not a criminal violation. Right. And we don't have to get into all the details. I mean, being in the country repeatedly could become a criminal violation. But in the case of these children, they are not in a criminal violation. So I think there should be solutions to civil issues. I mean, if they have broken the law in that specific example, and I used this example before, under the Affordable Care Act, everybody, by federal law, should have health insurance. If somebody doesn't have health insurance, should we, you know, throw that person into jail? Should we ban them from a hospital the rest of their entire lives? And I mean, like, doesn't make any sense. You pay a fine and you get right with the law, right? Or you pay the consequences, but the consequences shouldn't be removal of that.
And there's also a process with a violation of civil law or an alleged violation of civil law, whereby a claim is made in court. In how many of these cases, though, with DACA, with people who came here as minors, are we talking about parents whose visa ran out, things like that? Is that a factor at all in DACA?
I think so. I mean, so technically, I think if your parents were here documented, your children shouldn't have to worry about DACA. So because if the parents are here legally, typically the dependents are legally here. So if you have a DACA student, a DACA recipient, chances are, again, in general terms, that the parents are undocumented. And it can get complicated because depending on the child, the age of the person or whatever, but for the most part, yes, that's part of it.
But that's where it becomes a family issue, in my opinion, because you've got families, families of 6 where 3 may be DACA and 3 may be citizens. Right. So this becomes also, deportation becomes a significant family issue, and really for us, and as a faith-based institution, the last thing we ever want to see is families being split up because of civil law, for lack of a better term, and we really got to find a way to keep these families together.
With the global environment, global competition in the workplace, how much do each of you hear from our corporations here who are recruiting the best and the brightest? Sure. Not just nationally, but internationally. Are they concerned?
They're very concerned. There are lots of skilled jobs open in Memphis and beyond.
16,000. 16,000
is the number, and that's a number. And in the United States, there are just lots of jobs for trained individuals. So this whole notion of, they're taking American jobs, untrue. And the other notion that I just want to bring up in this session is the fact that they're not taking federal dollars. These are dollars that at least in my university, I had to raise from foundations and other individuals who are willing to support this program.
So they're not eligible for Pell
they cannot get Pell, Hope,
any,
or any of the normal and even loans. They can't take out loans. So we float our own loans for these students. I mean, really, the sort of argument that I've heard from lots of folks who are criticizing me for doing what we're doing, the fact that we have found money outside of the normal channels to support these individuals, and we're supporting all the students who come to CBU, but these are individuals who aren't getting federal dollars, so we're not sort of using federal dollars to train illegals, for lack of a better term.
Well, I mean, and we always talk about how Nashville is growing, right? 80 people a day they're adding. We should be welcoming. And so we should be welcoming density. We need people. I mean, that's what drives the economy. Because when people are here working, they're buying stuff, they're paying sales taxes, they're renting an apartment, or they're buying a car. I mean, all of these things get us going. That doesn't only benefit those particular individuals, they're benefiting the whole economy. And again, we said that number from Memphis, about 16,000 jobs. So many companies are hiring. Nobody's taking jobs away from anybody. Everybody's contributing. We need more people, and we're losing businesses that could potentially come to Memphis because we don't have a qualified force. One thing that is particular about DACA is that not every DACA recipient has a college degree, but many of them do. So this is, or they're in a pathway to do that. So this is a qualified workforce that we are lacking in our city that we desperately need. So if for so many different reasons, this has to happen.
And let's broaden away from DACA with just 5 minutes left here. You talked about 8,000 to 10,000 DACA students in Tennessee. Right. About how many undocumented immigrants are there in Memphis and Tennessee?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things that's hard to define
Sure.
because you've got people sort of in the shadows. They're not coming forward and saying they're undocumented.
Yeah, it's probably much larger than that number. So I would argue that perhaps the vast majority of undocumented people in Tennessee are older than DACA. They missed the DACA, they missed the DACA age cut. So there are thousands. I mean, so assuming, let's say there's 80,000 Latinos in our metro area. There are probably 20, 30,000 undocumented people here.
And the answer for them, to the people who say, look, they came here illegally. I mean, we talked about this before.
Sure.
What if you could wave a magic wand, Congress, not just with DACA, would do what with them? Because President Trump has talked about, deportation. You've had other national politicians talking about rounding them up. They're here illegally. They must go back. Borders, really aggressive efforts to deport.
Right.
Your approach would be what?
Absolutely. You have to have a system, a process for people who are in the interior of the country to become legal. I cannot require people to be driving, to have a Tennessee driver's license if I am not issuing licenses. Right? Or I cannot tell people you have to buy insurance, but we're not selling insurance. So it's hard to tell people you have to become documented if we're not documented any of these people. So a similar approach to DACA, there was a proposal called DAPA that was for parents of DACA recipients. Tell people, come forward, tell us that you're contributing to the economy. Let's do a background check, pay taxes. I mean, learn English, like all these things that we want to do. Like nobody's asking for an amnesty. Well, I mean, some people are, I'm not. I mean, let's have a process that makes sense, and we compromise. It's not gonna fit everybody. But if people are contributing to the economy, and they need to come out to the shadows, they just need a process. They just need. People tell me all the time, get in line. There is no line. Let's open a line so these people can come in. Pay a fine, pay whatever you have to do. I mean, we're smarter than that. Like we're figuring out so many things that are more complicated. You should be able to come up with a solution.
And for you, is that also, some people, what about border security?
Sure.
And whether or not it's a wall, but should there be a more secure border as part of that kind of direction?
Yeah, I mean the border is very secure, and if I challenge anybody who has never been through the border, it's a secure border. Every country is allowed to have a secure border. Not only you have immigrants, but you have weapons, you have drugs, you have human trafficking. So yeah, absolutely, we need a secure border. And the third piece, so in order to fix this, you have to deal with 11 million people who are undocumented in the United States today. You have to have a secure border, and also you have to decide what are we going to do, because tomorrow and in 5 years, people are going to come to this country, and we need those immigrants here. In certain cities, to a certain degree, I'm not talking about an open border, but we have to deal with those three things simultaneously. We cannot wait until we finish the border security while we deal with these other things. We need to have this conversation about border security, what to do with 11 million people who are here, and what are we going to do with people who want to come here in the future.
We need true immigration reform. The bottom line is we need true immigration reform that encompasses those three principles and beyond.
And DACA is a very good first step. It's
Right,
not the
right.
ultimate solution.
It is clearly not the
right,
ultimate
but it's a
solution.
good first step.
Do you think there are politicians and businesses who like to complain about border security, who like to complain about undocumented, who like to talk about deportation, but that privately are happy with the system as it is? Happy with the limbo. I've heard people say this before, and it's an interesting argument that they like the limbo. They can rail against immigrants and immigration policy, but they know no one's going to be deported, and they know there is the labor that's there, and they are perfectly happy with the status quo, as imperfect as it is.
I think so, but I think the opposite is true. There are people who publicly may. I mean, I think there are people who have a closet position on this issue, and for whatever reason they don't want to speak up, whether they are for or against. And it's unfortunate. I think people should be able to say how they feel. You know, I think this has risen to the level of any other civil rights issue. You know, it's almost like if you were to say, would you not support minorities in your business, or would you not support LGBTQ people in your business? We want to raise immigration to that level. Where saying no to that, it's almost like nonsense, right?
And ironically, is the Trump administration's move forcing that conversation on people?
Right. I mean, I remember. I remember when every time we have an issue, an election, we say, "Oh God, here we have an election coming. Nobody's going to talk about immigration." Now, immigration is center conversation for every electorate, for every election.
All right, we'll leave it there. I'm going to give Mauricio the last word. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Changes to immigration policy and the impact on Memphis tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Mauricio Calvo from Latino Memphis. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
And John Smarrelli from CBU, president. Thank you for being here.
It's a mess for colleges and universities, for landlords, for the economy. Besides, it's again the humanitarian aspect of that. It's rather complex. So he said he was going to end DACA on the first day of his administration. He waited 8 months. And even that, he said, well, we're going to end it, but I might revise it later. A lot of mixed messaging, and it makes it very confusing.
And Dr. Smarrelli, CBU has been very open and very aggressive in bringing DACA kids and working with undocumented immigrants. Your thoughts on this?
You know, our mission has been to reach out to those individuals who again, otherwise wouldn't get a college education. That's sort of mission-driven. So
now young adults and adults fall into this category. So let's talk your reaction. I'll start with you, Mauricio. When that proposal that Trump had talked about it, President Trump had talked about it on the campaign trail. Some people were frustrated he didn't, reverse the executive order on day one. He waited 6, 7, 8 months. What are your thoughts?
So it's very complicated, of course, like anything on immigration. Obviously, it's a humanitarian issue, but it's also a practical issue. I mean, there's about, depending on who you ask, anywhere between 8,000 to 10,000 people in Tennessee under this category, and thousands of them are here in Memphis. So even though the president may be saying that, or he said that during his campaign, 10,000 people in Tennessee are working, driving, going to school, and just kind of pulling the plug on that.
Thanks for the invitation.
And Bill Dree, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. The show we're doing today is inspired or is a result of the proposed changes to DACA. President Trump has said that DACA will expire in 6 months. It has caused quite a scramble among a lot of groups. It was pushed for by certain folks and really resisted by others. DACA was put in place by President Obama, in 2012, that allowed children who, and you all correct me where I get this wrong, but allowed children who were brought here at a very young age from another country, undocumented parents, and they are undocumented, to apply for status and move towards a legal status where they could work, they could drive, they could go to school. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So some 800,000 kids.
Makes perfect sense for CBU to do this. But the confusion that this has led to, the anxiety in our students, is my major concern, because there's a constant sense that, are we going to be deported? Are we able to complete our degree? What is going to really happen? And I think, that's sort of the situation right now, this uncertainty, this anxiety among our students, and what do we do next? And they're looking for the adults to sort of set the lead and set the pace for moving forward. I think what the president did in his action is sort of force the issue. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? And I think that really is I think there's an opportunity there for our legislators to do what they need to do, but there's certainly the anxiety on the part of our students.
Right, and President Trump has said, and then I'll go to Bill, but President Trump has said, look, he wants Congress. The reason that he's saying